Mass kidnapping. SpongeBob and Patrick kidnapped the entire population of Bikini Bottom because they thought everyone was an alien, not like 5 people, not a small group, the entire town. 500 residents captured, tied up, and stored in a rocket ship like they were collecting baseball cards. The logic here is what really gets you. These two saw everyone they know, their friends, neighbors, people they interact with daily, and decided, yep, definitely aliens, time to abduct them all. Most people who think their neighbors are aliens just avoid eye contact at the mailbox. They use Sandy's rocket as their kidnapping vehicle, which adds theft of spacecraft to the charges. But the real issue is that they systematically hunted down and captured 500 individuals against their will. That's not a mistake or an accident. That's an organized mass abduction operation. Each kidnapping charge is about 20 years in prison. With 500 counts, SpongeBob's looking at roughly 10,000 years behind bars. Murder. Fell in love with a Krabby Patty, not metaphorically, like actually romantic love, and when 21 clams tried to eat his burger girlfriend, he karate chopped them all to death. The relationship with the patty is already concerning. This sponge developed genuine romantic feelings for a sandwich he made at work. But instead of recognizing this as a sign he needs help, SpongeBob decided that anyone threatening his burger bride deserved capital punishment. Clams are sentient in Bikini Bottom. They have feelings, families, probably clam jobs and clam mortgages. And SpongeBob killed 21 of them without hesitation. Each murder charge is life in prison. So 21 counts means 21 consecutive life sentences. Manslaughter. Made himself a sundae with onions, ketchup, and peanuts because apparently his taste buds don't work. His breath became so toxic it literally killed fish and caused accidents all over Bikini Bottom. His breath was a biological weapon. He walked around town spreading death with his mouth like some kind of yellow plague carrier. Accidents happened because drivers passed out from the smell. SpongeBob turned his morning snack choice into a public health crisis. The worst part is, he didn't immediately brush his teeth or realize something was wrong. He kept going about his day, spreading toxic fumes, wondering why everyone was running away. Most people would notice if their breath was causing fatalities, and maybe pop a mint. Multiple counts of involuntary manslaughter are about 8 years each. With several deaths and injuries caused by his breath, SpongeBob's looking at roughly 32 years in prison for making the worst food combination in history, and then refusing to acknowledge his biological hazard status. Hey, by the way, I'm posting pretty consistently here, so it would mean a lot if you could subscribe to the channel and drop a like for the algorithm. Attempted murder, food tampering, and obstruction of justice. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs served a poisoned Krabby Patty to a health inspector because they thought he was a fake. The patty was so contaminated, it knocked the guy out cold. Instead of calling an ambulance like normal people, they assumed he was dead and decided to bury the body. Think about that decision-making process. This man appears dead. Should we call for help? No. Let's dig a grave and hide the evidence. That's not panic. That's conspiracy to cover up what they believed was a murder they just committed together. They carried what they thought was a corpse around, argued about where to bury it, and actively tried to hide their crime from the authorities. The health inspector was alive the whole time, but SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs didn't know that. In their minds, they had just killed a man and were tampering with evidence. Food tampering that causes harm is 20 years. Attempted murder is 10 to 30 years. Obstruction of justice and tampering with evidence is another 5 to 20 years. SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs are both looking at 35 to 70 years each, and that's being generous. Krusty Krab explosion and property destruction. Tried to clean a single plate at the Krusty Krab and ended up using a military-grade laser that destroyed the entire restaurant. The whole building gone, because this sponge couldn't just use soap and water like a normal dishwasher. His approach to cleaning one plate involved escalating to weapons-grade technology. Most people would scrub harder or let it soak. SpongeBob went straight to lasers that can vaporize matter as his cleaning solution. The thought process here is genuinely unhinged. Mr. Krabs lost his entire business in an instant. The kitchen, the dining area, the registers, everything SpongeBob was supposed to be protecting as an employee. Instead of cleaning the restaurant, he obliterated it from existence. Destruction of property using explosives or dangerous devices is 5 to 20 years, depending on the value of what was destroyed. The Krusty Krab is Mr. Krabs' livelihood, probably worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Terroristic recklessness with explosives. Handling of an explosive pie nearly killed Squidward and leveled the Krusty Krab because he had no idea what he was doing. The pie was essentially a bomb, and SpongeBob treated it like a regular dessert, tossing it around, playing with it, completely oblivious to the danger. When it finally detonated in Squidward's face, it was sheer luck that Squidward survived it all. The explosion was massive, the kind of blast that should have killed everyone in the building. SpongeBob's ignorance doesn't excuse the fact that he mishandled military-grade explosives in a crowded restaurant. SpongeBob's looking at 5 years in prison and $110,000 in fines for his pie incident. Unlicensed surgery and practicing medicine without a license, pretended to be a doctor, and performed plastic surgery on Squidward using his own body parts as surgical tools. Not fake surgery with toy equipment, actual reconstructive surgery on someone's face without any medical training, license, or understanding of basic anatomy. Squidward came out of that operation looking like a nightmare. His face was completely disfigured because SpongeBob had no idea what he was doing. Most people pretending to be doctors maybe use a stethoscope wrong or misread a thermometer. SpongeBob performed invasive facial reconstruction like he was playing Operation, but with real consequences. The confidence to just start cutting into someone's face without any training is staggering. Just pure, unqualified enthusiasm and a scalpel. Squidward trusted him and ended up permanently scarred because SpongeBob wanted to play surgeon. Practicing medicine without a license is 2 to 4 years in prison. Performing surgery without credentials that results in disfigurement adds negligence and assault charges for another 3 to 10 years. SpongeBob's looking at 5 to 14 years total, plus about $10,000 in fines and probably a civil lawsuit from Squidward for damages. Reckless driving and vehicular destruction. Has failed his boating test so many times that his driving attempts have destroyed a senior home, multiple trucks, and parts of the city. His driving is less needs practice and more active threat to public safety. Mrs. Puff has tried to teach him hundreds of times, and every single attempt ends in catastrophic property damage or near-death experiences. SpongeBob behind the wheel is basically a natural disaster with a license plate. Buildings collapse, vehicles explode, innocent bystanders flee in terror. The fact that he keeps trying despite being objectively the worst driver in history shows a level of denial that's almost admirable. SpongeBob's probably looking at 2 to 5 years total in jail plus $5,000 to $10,000 in fines and a permanent revocation of any chance he'll ever get a license. Impersonating a police officer in false arrest, dressed up as a police officer and started arresting people for fake crimes, including a little girl selling cookies. Not pretend arrests. Actual detainment where he physically stopped people and claimed legal authority he didn't have. Impersonating a cop is serious because it undermines actual law enforcement and violates people's rights. SpongeBob wasn't doing it for a costume party. He was actively exercising fake police powers, making arrests, and interfering with real officers who had to deal with his nonsense. He arrested a child, a small girl with cookies, because SpongeBob decided her cookie sales were somehow illegal in his made-up understanding of the law. That kid was just trying to make some money for her scout troop or whatever the underwater equivalent is, and SpongeBob treated her like a criminal. SpongeBob's looking at 3 to 10 years in prison and about $5,000 in fines for his brief, unauthorized career in law enforcement. Stalking and harassment followed Mrs. Puff everywhere, to prison, into her bathroom, into her literal nightmares. This isn't running into each other sometimes. This is persistent, invasive stalking that crosses every boundary of personal space and privacy. Mrs. Puff can't escape him. She goes to prison to get away from teaching him, and SpongeBob follows her there. She's in her own home, in her bathroom, and SpongeBob somehow appears. He's in her dreams, which shouldn't even be physically possible, but SpongeBob finds a way. The psychological damage of being stalked this relentlessly is immense. Mrs. Puff is terrified of SpongeBob, not because he's violent, but because he won't leave her alone, no matter what she does. She's changed jobs, moved, gone to prison, nothing stops him from showing up. Stalking charges are typically 1 to 5 years, depending on severity. Given how persistent and invasive SpongeBob's stalking is, he's looking at 2 to 5 years in prison. Breaking and entering plus trespassing. Broke into Sandy's home during her hibernation, completely ignored the keep out signs, and then shaved off her fur to use as warmth for themselves. They violated her home, her privacy, and her body while she was unconscious and vulnerable. The signs were clear. Do not disturb. Probably several variations of seriously don't come in here. But SpongeBob and Patrick saw those warnings and decided they applied to other people, not them. Rules are just suggestions when you're SpongeBob SquarePants, apparently. Then they escalated from simple trespassing to assault by shaving Sandy while she was asleep. When Sandy woke up, she was bald and furious, which is the appropriate response to finding your friends shaved you in your sleep. Breaking and entering is 6 months to 3 years. Assault for the shaving is 1 to 3 years. False advertising and consumer fraud. Went door to door, selling chocolate bars and told customers his chocolate could cure baldness, diseases, and probably cancer if you ate enough of it. None of this was true. It was just regular chocolate, but SpongeBob decided lying about miracle cures was a solid sales strategy. This is textbook consumer fraud. Making false health claims to sell products is illegal because desperate people will buy anything if they think it'll cure their problems. Spongebob exploited that desperation to move chocolate bars, promising medical miracles he couldn't deliver. Some elderly fish probably bought those chocolate bars thinking they'd cure their arthritis or grow their hair back. Instead, they got diabetes and disappointment. Spongebob took their money, made wild claims, and faced zero consequences until now. False advertising with health claims is a serious offense. $10,000 to $50,000 in fines per violation. First-degree burglary and theft. Join Mr. Krabs and Patrick on a panty raid, which is exactly what it sounds like. They broke into a woman's house to steal her underwear, except the house belonged to Mr. Krabs' mother, which somehow makes it worse and more disturbing. They planned this. It wasn't a spontaneous decision. They actively chose to break into someone's home and steal intimate clothing. That's first-degree burglary because they went in with intent to commit theft, and what they were stealing makes it exponentially creepier. First-degree burglary is 3 to 10 years in prison. Theft of intimate items can add sexual offense charges that bump it to 5 to 15 years. With 3 perpetrators involved, conspiracy charges add another year or 2. Spongebob's looking at 6 to 17 years in prison, plus $10,000 to $250,000 in fines, and honestly, he deserves every second. Reckless lifeguard endangerment. Accepted a job as a lifeguard despite not being able to swim. Let that sink in. A lifeguard who can't swim. That's like hiring a blind person to drive a bus or a deaf person to be a sound engineer, except those at least don't put lives in immediate danger. When Patrick started drowning in shallow water, SpongeBob's solution was to drain the entire lagoon, not swim out to save him, not throw a flotation device, just eliminate all the water so technically no one could drown. The property damage and ecological disaster this caused is almost impressive. Fish were left flopping on dry sand, the entire beach ecosystem was destroyed, boats were grounded, all because SpongeBob didn't know how to do the one job he was hired for and chose the most destructive solution possible rather than admit his incompetence. SpongeBob's looking at 3 to 17 years in prison and about $100,000 to $500,000 in fines and environmental restoration costs. Theft of a balloon. Stole a balloon because they thought borrowing meant they could take it for free. The logic here is kindergarten level. They genuinely believed if you borrow something, you don't have to give it back or pay for it. They ran from the police, panicked, and treated this petty theft like they just robbed a bank. The guilt consumed them instantly, which shows they knew it was wrong but did it anyway. Most criminals at least commit to their crimes. SpongeBob and Patrick stole a balloon and immediately fell apart psychologically. The balloon was being given away for free that day anyway, which makes the whole crime pointless. They stole something that was free, ran from cops, and traumatized themselves over a balloon they could have just asked for. Petty theft is usually 30 days to 6 months and a $500 to $1,000 fine. But since it was free balloon day, the charges would likely be dismissed. Invasion of privacy. Used his detachable brain drone to spy on Squidward in the bathroom. Not accidentally glimpsed through a window, actively piloted a flying camera into Squidward's private bathing space to watch him without permission. This is voyeurism. It's a sex crime. SpongeBob became a peeping Tom using futuristic technology, which somehow makes it worse. Most peeping Toms use binoculars or poorly placed mirrors. SpongeBob used advanced robotics to violate Squidward's privacy in his most vulnerable moments. Squidward has every right to bathe without being surveilled by his neighbor's remote-controlled brain. The violation here is profound. SpongeBob took something that should have been completely private and turned it into his personal viewing entertainment. Voyeurism and invasion of privacy are 6 months to 2 years in jail plus sex offender. Registration in many jurisdictions. Conspiracy to tamper with evidence. Back to the Nasty Patty incident, SpongeBob didn't just serve poisoned food, he helped Mr. Krabs bury what they thought was a body. That's conspiracy to tamper with evidence, obstruction of justice, and accessory after the fact to what they believed was murder. They dug a grave, they carried the corpse together, they discussed where to hide it. This wasn't panic, this was coordinated criminal activity. 2 people working together to cover up a death they thought they caused makes both of them guilty of conspiracy. The planning and execution of the cover-up shows intent. They weren't confused, they knew exactly what they were doing and chose to hide evidence rather than face consequences. That's the difference between an accident and a crime. This was already calculated into the earlier Nasty Patty charges, but separately, conspiracy to tamper with evidence is 2 to 10 years. Obstruction is another 1 to 5 years. Being an accessory to murder, even one that didn't actually happen, is 5 to 20 years. SpongeBob's complicity in the cover-up makes him just as guilty as Mr. Krabs. If you add up all of SpongeBob's crimes with consecutive sentencing, he's looking at somewhere between 11,000 and 15,000 years in prison, multiple life sentences, hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, sex offender registration, and enough community service hours to last several lifetimes. The kindest, most innocent-looking sponge in Bikini Bottom is actually one of the most prolific criminals in the ocean. SpongeBob SquarePants isn't Employee of the Month. He's public enemy number 1. If you enjoyed this video, I'm going to be posting a lot here, so please subscribe, and thanks for watching.